Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 word. It feels so good to be able to say this. And to the first race reaction of the brand new Formula One season. Oh my God, we're finally there. Unbelievable. And what a way to kick off the season as well. What a race that was. Absolutely fantastic. Loads to talk about as always in this race reaction. We'll be joined very shortly by Dan from over at Racing Reviews. Couple of things super quickly as always. Don't forget, if you are new to the channel, you won't know this, but if you are returning to the channel, don't forget these are just reactions. They are not reviews. So if we miss your favorite driver or miss your favorite team or don't cover a topic that you're desperate for us to talk about, we're not condemning anyone to the fiery depths of hell or anything like that. We're just not going to get to everything in this stream. It's just so much happened today. I'm so happy. Hope you're all well. Plenty to go over, like I say. So we'll kick off as we always do, though, with the race results. There you go. There are going to be people if you're tuning in now and you haven't seen the race, you see that, you're probably crying, but it's absolutely fine. Go and watch the race. It was fantastic. Lewis Hamilton taking victory, first race of the season. Max Verstappen just 7/10 of a second behind in second place. If that is what we're getting in 2021, that is absolutely ruddy fine by me. Absolutely brilliant. Valtteri Bottas, third place, 37 seconds off, but that does not tell the full story of his race. Lando Norris, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant in fourth place. What a start for him and McLaren. Sergio Perez, well, yeah, we'll talk about him in a bit. Fifth place, but that, again, does not tell the full story of his race. Charles Leclerc in that Ferrari, sixth place. Great start for them. Seventh for Daniel Ricciardo. Probably disappointed to be so far off Norris, but at the end of the day, it's points on the board on his McLaren debut. Carlos Sainz, maybe the same feeling at Ferrari, but a solid start in eighth place for Ferrari. Yuki Tsunoda, 9th for Alfa Tauri, 10th for Lance Stroll, taking that final point for Aston Martin. Disappointed with them this weekend, I must say. Again, we'll talk about it properly in a bit, but I expected more. Kimi Räikkönen, 11th for Alfa Romeo, just ahead of teammates Antonio Giovinazzi. Esteban Ocon in 13th. George Russell, 14th for Williams. Of course, got out of Q1 again on Saturday. 15th for Sebastian Vettel, down there because of a penalty. More on that later. Mick Schumacher, important thing for him today was to finish on his debut, 16th place. Now, Pierre Gasly and Nicholas Latifi are both classified in the official results. However, on the official timing, they did stop, and there's a picture you'll see later of Gasly being wheeled back into the garage, so I've put them as DNF. If you're new, what I like to say is if you haven't crossed the line, you've not finished the race, so it's a DNF. It's just me being pedantic. Fernando Alonso also retired. And Nikita Mazepin's F1 debut lasted a whole whopping 3 corners. I'm saying no more than that. I'm sure somebody will fast comment, but I'm saying no more than that. What I will say, though, is a very good evening to Dan. F1's back, mate. Are you happy? You better be.
Oh, I'm happy. Oh, I am so happy. If any of you in the chat are not happy after that brilliant start to the season, you're mental. What a race. That was magic.
It really was. Well, and it was kind of like start to finish. I mean, we'd hyped this up, or Sky and everyone else was hyping this race up after qualifying yesterday. Is this the year we're finally going to get Hamilton versus Verstappen? If we don't get it all season, mate, we certainly got it today, didn't we? Absolutely. I keep saying it. Brilliant. And it's been a while, actually. I'm just trying to think. I mean, obviously, forget last year, because last year was God knows what. Austria was incredible, but I can't remember the last time in a normal season that I've been this hyped after the first race. I mean, yesterday was the first time since 2013 that a Mercedes wasn't starting on pole for the opening race.
I know exactly what you mean. And last year, I mean, the opener to last year was bonkers, but I think the actual race and what we got today set up the season a lot better, if that makes sense, because what was on display today was a fight that, what we're hoping anyway, is going to last all season long. Mercedes and Red Bull have a car that is so similar in pace, and something I think all Formula One fans have been asking for years is we want the drivers to make the difference. And I think that's going to be the storyline throughout this season, not only at the fight at the front, but that midfield as well today. So many teams in the mix, so many cars making overtakes. Even Alfa Romeo seemed to be in the mix. Just everywhere you looked up and down today's grid, almost on every single lap, there was something going on. If we can have that even for half the races this year, it's going to be an awesome season.
Absolutely. lots of images as usual, courtesy of XPB, are going to be scrolling on the screen from the race. So they might not sync up to what we're saying, but that's just the easiest way for me to do it with these sort of instant reaction streams. It's about an hour and 20 minutes since the race finished, so it's not quite instant, but it's as instant as you're going to get. I think we've got to start at the front, though, haven't we, Dan? Lewis Hamilton versus Max Verstappen. Been waiting for this for about, well, 4 years, would you say, something like that, and we finally got a challenge from Red Bull on the opening day, but it wasn't without, can we say, controversy might be pushing it a little bit. Really, for me, it came down to strategy, but the big talking point towards the end was Max Verstappen finally catching Hamilton. We'll talk about strategy in a bit, catching Hamilton, and then, of course, going to make that move around the outside of turn 4, ran off the track, all 4 wheels, not only over the white line, but over the red and white curb. He was instructed, I suppose, the way to put it, to hand that position back to Lewis Hamilton. If he hadn't, probably would have ended up with a penalty. I think he was a little bit frustrated. He wanted to push on and maybe build that 5 seconds plus to try and offset that penalty. But do you think that was the right move from Red Bull? Because for me, ultimately, we can talk about that loads and we'll get on strategy, like I say. But for me, it's not that's lost Red Bull the race today. It was the mistake at the first pit stops.
Yeah, I think you're right. Strategy was awesome today to watch, all the different mind games of all the different teams and drivers. But as you say, that fight at the front, I think that was the real game changer. And I think Mercedes' experience now of seems like a million seasons in a row fighting for the title, I think that really helped them out. And I think that definitely gave Lewis the edge in that battle against Max. But in terms of that incident where he did run wide, I did think that was the right thing to do. I have lost count of the amount of times I've sat with you here, mate, after a race. There's been some kind of penalty, some kind of investigation, and we've had no clue who was going to win the race after a session. So the fact that we got it done on track properly, I felt was the right thing to do. Yes, I think Max had the pace to gap Lewis by 5 seconds. But that would have been a risk, because if they had been told all weekend long, like we've been led to believe after the race, that you shouldn't be overtaking or going wide there anyway, but especially 4 wheels over the line, running the risk that it could have been a 10-second penalty, I'm not too sure that would have gone down too well at all. So doing it on track, the right thing to do, but certainly strategy was the main game changer today. And I think Red Bull, a little bit slow to react. Well, I would maybe even say a little bit lucky that they got second, because Valtteri, his awful second stop, that was 10 seconds. If he didn't have that, he would have been in the mix as well. So Red Bull, I think they need to do a little bit of homework in terms of pit stops and strategy. But again, that's not a major issue, and that will be fixed for next time at Imola.
Yeah, the track limits thing was... It was kind of farcical all weekend, really. I don't like starting on a negative after such an epic Grand Prix, but it was farcical all weekend because you kind of, in one session they were policing them and another session they weren't, and then it came to the race and they weren't going to police them. Then they changed that and said that they would keep an eye on it and monitor it, and if anybody's seen to be going over there and gaining an advantage, forgetting that if there wasn't an advantage to gain, the car wouldn't be out there in the first place. But if anyone's seen to be gaining an advantage, they will step in and issue black and white flags and potentially penalties. And then you've got the Mercedes doing it for the first part of the race, and then Max Verstappen being told by his team that, well, hang on a minute, mate, you know, Mercedes are doing it, go for it. And then the stewards step in and change that again. What needs to happen on track limits is the same thing we've been saying for, must be 2.5, 3 years now, Dan. They've got to be consistent with it. Either you're policing it or you're not. You can't go chopping and changing throughout the weekend, and maybe even depending on, I'll go and read it away later if I've not had a chance to look at it properly, but what the directives were pre-race, you can't then appear to be changing them mid-race either. It's absolutely ridiculous. But in terms of, if we're talking, forget track limits for a second in terms of whatever Michael Massey said this weekend, the rule in Formula One is quite clear that if you overtake a car with all 4 wheels off what is considered the track, then you have to give that position back as a penalty. So Max was instructed to give it back by the letter of the law. It's the right thing to do. Lewis Hamilton didn't push him out wide, but ran him out wide as any other driver would have done in that position. Lando Norris was squeezed out by, I think it was Bottas, possibly early doors as well. So that's just racing out there. If you're caught out there, it's tough luck. If you overtake when you're off track, you're going to have to give the position back. It's just the way it is. It's just really weird that track limits were so all over the place this weekend. A track where in theory, it should be quite easy to monitor them. Just don't go over the other side of the red and white curve. It's not that complicated. But yeah, I think for me, we can talk about this all night and debate about whether or not that's what cost Red Bull the race. I don't think it was. I mean, I kind of agree with you. I think Max could have got that 5 or whatever seconds ahead of Hamilton, but 5.5 seconds up the road, one lock up on the last lap, and he's second again. So it's a massive risk. So I tend to agree with you on that one. But it was that first pit stop when Hamilton pitted. I was so shocked, and I think I was listening to Crofty and Martin Brundle, and they were kind of, he's going again. I was so surprised, and it was summed up brilliantly by either Ted Kravitz or Martin Brundle in the commentary. When Verstappen eventually pitted, it felt like he was in sort of no man's land, and the strategy just didn't make any sense in that regard. But this is what I kept saying last season, and I'm going to keep pushing, and I'm not going to be taking shots at Alex Albon. He's not in that car anymore. We should not be taking shots at him left, right, and centre, because that's just not necessary. It's about Checo now in that second car. But that is exactly why Red Bull needs Sergio Perez up there in that 4th place, 3rd place, whatever, to do the job that Albon and Gasly couldn't do. Because Verstappen was left compromised today by the fact he was up there on his own and taking on 2 Mercedes. Mercedes had complete control of strategy, I'd argue, most, if not all, of the race today. I don't think Red Bull had any control over that. Mercedes could pull the trigger when they wanted to. They did. They could pull the trigger to prevent the undercut from Verstappen. They did. They just played it perfectly, and I totally agree with you. I think Verstappen could have passed Bottas on track, and I think he would have had to. I don't necessarily agree that he's lucky to get second, because I think even if Bottas had leapfrogged him through strategy, Verstappen would have got through. That's not attacking Bottas straight away. First reaction stream of the season, everyone's going like, Sean hates Bottas again. I do not. I'm just making the point. I think he would have got him anyway, but it could have gone very wrong, and that you might even argue, Dan, and maybe that's the point you're making. Mercedes kind of shot themselves in the foot a little bit with Bottas today. They could have had a 1-2. The chance was there. The opportunity was there, is probably the way to put it.
Yeah, and like you've just touched on, I think this race is kind of going to be an anomaly that Checo Perez isn't in that fight at the front. This was one of the rare occasions this season. I think Mercedes kind of had a free go at Max Verstappen. I think there was maybe 1 or 2 laps where Perez went a little bit longer early on in the race, held up Bottas maybe for a couple of sectors. But apart from that, like you say, more often we need Checo at the front fighting. And I think that will be happening. But that Mercedes car, that Mercedes team, they're going to be able to fight all season long. What we thought in testing, yes, I think Red Bull are the team to beat in terms of overall pace, but that car is so similar. In qualifying, I think it's a little bit behind, but in race trim, love to see that they're so close. And I think these tiny little strategy errors on either team today are going to make a big difference when it comes to the end of the year. Mercedes definitely did the right thing, pitting Bottas late on, going for that fastest lap. And with Checo being in traffic, great race from Checo. I'm sure we'll talk about that in a moment. But with him being in traffic, that was just one extra point Mercedes were able to grab at the end. But overall, I think as the season goes on, those little rusty moments from strategy today will start to fade away a little bit.
Yeah, I felt a bit for Bottas today. I did, and I agree with, he's got to go fastest lap. He was 3rd, whatever, wasn't he? And the only way he was going to win that race or finish 2nd was if those two collided in any way, which would have been an unbelievably spectacular end to the brilliant first race we'd have. But he had to go fastest lap, so it made sense. And I was actually sat watching this, and they pulled Bottas in, and I looked at the timing screens. I thought, well, that makes sense because he got the gap. And then it twigged. Something just in my tiny little mind, something just went, hang on a minute. This year, that fastest lap point in a close battle between Mercedes and Red Bull could be vital. These fastest lap points in these races. So actually, we saw it sort of in 2019 when Hamilton and Bottas were at one point almost dueling for the title, if we're being generous. But this is going to be the first year, really, where we see the strategical side of that fastest lap when it comes to a championship fight, if things are indeed that close, because, it's 23 points over the course of a season. And if it's won by a handful, it could come down to, well, look, Bottas set the fastest lap in Bahrain and Hamilton set it in Spain or whatever like that. And I think that just has a lovely dynamic to what is going to be potentially a bloody brilliant season. That said, we'll get to Imola and Mercedes will have found whatever problem they've got, sort it, and then absolutely dominate the rest of the season, which would be about the way it would go with this turbo hybrid era. But yeah, I just felt a bit for Bottas today. Again, the bad luck at Mercedes, it falls Bottas's way with, I've not seen a press release yet, but I assume was a sticky wheel nut on his right front. If you didn't see it or you'd forgotten, just front right wouldn't come off. They let the car drop, or the jackman did, then had to get the car jacked up really quickly to then get the front wheel on. Lost 10.9 seconds to stop. So that's a good 9-second loss there, isn't it? Because you say 1.92 seconds for the stop, so a 9-second loss there, and just so frustrating that everything, when bad luck happens at Mercedes, it doesn't happen all the time, but when bad luck does strike, it always seems to strike Bottas, and it happened again today. So a little bit disappointed, but it must be said that, yes, he would have been closer, but do you think realistically, without that pit stop mistake and that extra pit stop for fastest lap, do you think he'd have really challenged Max at any point in that race? Dan, did you sit there and think, well, Bottas has got a shot here? Because I can't honestly say that I did.
Definitely not in the first stint.
No.
I mean, in those early laps when he was, before the pit stops, 5-7 seconds behind the lead too, which was, I thought, quite alarming, considering this was supposed to be the year again where we are supposed to see a more aggressive Valtteri, a driver ready to push Hamilton. And I thought, it's going to be another one of those seasons. The second stint, he was much, much better. And there was a period where he was gaining on Max was gaining on Lewis. And I did actually think that Bottas was going to be in the fight for the win. And then there was that pit stop blunder, and then it all fell apart for him. So I think he would have been there or thereabouts. I think with Hamilton and Verstappen having their little duel at the end, I think that perhaps would have put a little bit more pressure on Max to get the move done a little bit earlier. Maybe could have caused an incident. I don't know. But overall, no, I think this was still Hamilton and Verstappen's race to lose in that sense. But just that little bit more pressure maybe would have been put on Max's shoulders. But hey, Lewis still won the race, so I think the overall result still would have been as it was.
Raul making a good point in chat. Why that pit stop in the first place? He was going well. He would still have been 4 or 5 seconds off. But he's got a point there, because over the team radio, Bottas was told Hamilton's pitted because of the undercut. Or the threat of the undercut, we need to go long. And I think he only went about, was it 2 or 3 laps, if that, longer? And then they made that stop. So maybe that was, maybe they could have, maybe Mercedes were in a good position to be able to mix the strategy up a bit rather than make. And I think actually Bottas said post race he wanted to go long on those tyres as well. So do you think, well, It could, and I'll wait for more information. I'm sure we'll get it over the next few days and over weeks and months. Things tend to come out very slowly with F1 sometimes, don't they, with inter-team things. But I wonder if part of this is that internal rule that Mercedes have, where they will not favour one driver, and if they can keep them on the same strategy, they will. But if they do that this season and Red Bull are close, that could cost them massively this year. That car, they're going to have to mix up strategy from time to time. So it was just I agree with Raul. It was a bit of an odd stop when they made it. He kind of ended up in a bit of a no man's land situation. I'm not saying, by the way, he could have pitted 20 laps later and still had a sticky wheel nut, but it was just an odd timing of that strategy. But I just think it was great to see those guys up there fighting. Absolutely. And I think we'll stick with the top 2 teams just for a minute. I'm going to hop over Norris, but do not fear, Lando Norris fans. I will be back to him in a moment, because I've been massively impressed with him again today for a season opener. But Sergio Perez, I mean, I thought when he signed for Red Bull, honestly, that I had used this saying that I've been using for years for the last time. But no, Sergio Perez, Dan, doing what Sergio Perez does best. Started from the pit lane, ended up back of the pack, made an early pit stop, made his way through the field, ended up 5th place. I mean, frankly, he's lucky to be in the race, given that his car ran out of power or there was an issue with the car and it just stopped, didn't it, on the formation lap. Yes, that's the phrase I'm looking for, formation lap. Looked like his Sunday was over. Got it going again, was smart enough to tell the marshals to bug off while he tried to get the car going again. Got back to the pit, started from the pit lane, finishes 5th place. I mean, great tyre management, some really good overtaking as well, some aggressive stuff. I know he's in a faster car, but still, it's still great to see that overtaking. Disappointed for him yesterday. I think he was disappointed in himself for not being able to get into Q3, but bloody hell, mate. I mean, 5th place from the pit lane. He's not really disappointed with that, is he? 10 points. I'd say that's even better than damage limitation in many ways, because he probably would have, with respect, ended up 4th today anyway.
Yeah, I think you're right. And also that very strange pit stop he did after we had that safety car right at the beginning. And then he started on the mediums and then went on to the mediums, which I don't know if Red Bull have said why they decided to do that. I would have assumed maybe they'd go for a hard tyre. Anyway, it's Sergio Perez, isn't it? It didn't really matter. He didn't care. He got on with it. And I think that's what Red Bull, they've been searching for, haven't they, over the last few years? And no Gasly and a little bit more Alex Albon did have these situations where they started 12th, 13th and were able to fight back. That car breaking down on the formation lap just made it 10 times worse for old Sergio Perez. But I think in that position where he almost had nothing to lose starting from the pit lane, I wonder if that just let him, well, lose the pressure of the situation, really, because the drive itself was faultless, something we are so used to with Sergio Perez, but just consistently making overtakes. And whilst at the end of the race, of course, the TV directors were focused on that battle at the front, rightly so. In that little box that we got on the left-hand side, it was always Sergio Perez passes Carlos Sainz. He's passed Daniel Ricciardo. He's passed Charles Leclerc, always making moves right to the end. And whereas, and again, I hate mentioning Alex Albon, and I really don't mean to be mean. Whereas last year, we kind of would get to that halfway stage in the race, and Albon would get stuck in that DRS train, which overall today, I don't really think we got. I think these new regs look quite good for that in cars following, but we'll leave that to one side for a moment while we get back to Checo. Always moving forward. And to finish P5, like you mentioned, he was probably aiming for P4 anyway today. And probably after yesterday was aiming for just getting into points at some point. So to come away with driver of the day, a big haul of points, that's a perfect start to his Red Bull career.
I'm going to contradict myself a bit here. I say that he probably would have been 4th, but the pace he had at times today, with Bottas's pit stop error, if he had managed to get into Q3 and maybe qualified 4th or 5th, he could have had a podium today because he would have been right in that fight. And I think it was, let's even see the comment now. If I can't, you'll know who you are. Somebody just said in chat something along the lines of, had Checo been up there, Mercedes may not have been able to pull the trigger on strategy today, which is kind of the point I was making earlier, that's why Red Bull needs somebody up there, because if Perez is 4th and he's a second and a half, 2 seconds behind Bottas, it's Red Bull that dictate the strategy because they can pull the trigger with Checo, and that then forces Bottas, which forces Verstappen, which forces, and that's when we get that really good fight at the front strategically. But right at the front today, we had some fantastic racing between Hamilton and Verstappen. Do not be surprised if the rest of this season is them two 30 seconds up the road from everybody else, just battling out like we saw in Hungary back in 2019. One of my, people think I'm mad when I say this, but one of my favourite races of the turbo hybrid era, because it was just probably the two best drivers on the grid, relentless with pace, going flat out, and probably would have lapped up to and including 3rd place without an extra pit stop. I mean, it was an incredible race, that one for me, and that's what we're going to see this season. And if we get the great strategy and the great racing, I think we're in for an absolute ruddy treat at the front this season. Do you think we're getting a little bit too excited, Dan, because it is ultimately one race weekend at a track they've tested at for 3 days? Do you think we might be disappointed at Imola, or do you really believe that this is going to be the first season-long battle between Mercedes and another team for the title? I know we've had Ferrari up there, but they didn't really sort of sustain that for the full seasons, did they, in 17 and 18?
I think this is the real deal. Again, I'm trying to hold it back a little bit because I think over the last 7 or 8 years, we have been stung a little bit when Seb has won the first race. I mean, Lewis hasn't won the first race of the season since 2015. So I really don't want to get too carried away. But at the same time, that Red Bull just looks so good all weekend long. If Max did win today's race, it wouldn't have been through luck. That car generally had the pace. Max Verstappen, as we all know, is a world-class driver, one of the best on the grid. And I would say Bahrain's a pretty neutral circuit. It isn't one that I think would suit, I mean, traditionally it's always suited Mercedes, but I don't think it's a particularly top speed focused track or high downforce track. It's quite in the middle, I would say. So the fact that it's so close on this track, I feel works well for most of them this season. But I do remember a few years ago, 2019, the start of that season, Bottas won the first race, and we were all expecting Ferrari domination. We head to Bahrain, Leclerc almost wins, and it's a completely different story. So I think it will take a few, maybe 3 or 4 races until we get a full definitive picture of where everyone is. But so far, so good. I think we have a title fight on our hands.
Yeah, because it's interesting. We've got Bahrain that we know. We've got Imola we don't really know with these modern cars. We've got Portugal we don't know with these modern cars. Then you go to Spain, where teams will bring updates and Mercedes tend to dominate. I think that's going to be the first one. I think Spain will be the one that lays out more or less a definitive running order, because Spain is the track that all the teams know well, and we know that's where usually you see Mercedes dominate. So if Max Verstappen rocks up there and dominates that weekend and wins it, we've got a title fight, definitely. I just... doesn't need to be a title fight. It just... this kind of racing, I've said this so many times before, I'm not bothered about who wins the championship, it's how we get there. If Hamilton wins all 23 races, but we have that kind of action, people will be like, oh, another Hamilton victory. But it's still great racing to enjoy. We need to do super chats super quickly. One's just come in, which I will get to in a second. This guy blows my mind. But anyway, Patrick Mahoney, thank you very much for your contribution. Says MotoGP has pressure sensors in certain corners. You get 6 chances before a 5-second penalty. What do you think of that solution? I think that is a fantastic solution, Patrick. Quite why, with all the technology we have in Formula One, we don't have sensors at corners like that. I will never understand that. I will never get it. There's plenty of technology there to be able to do it. But ultimately, and I know I keep saying this, they stay inside the white lines in Monaco, so they can do it. I know there's a barrier there, but they can do it when they want to. I sound like Peter Windsor, don't I? Stick a wall there. But it's kind of the truth. It's absolutely the truth. So they can do it when they need to or when they have to, and that's how I feel about that one. Armands, who has, don't forget, an Alonso avatar, was with us through a lot of testing. Says, again, Alonso stopped from spanking everyone's bottoms due to technical issues. Cries, we'll get to Alonso shortly. April Kurtz, thank you very much for your contribution. Says, why do some of the cars have so much rake this year for more downforce? I'll try and remember that one, April, and we'll come back to that one once we finish talking about the racing, but certainly a lot of talk about rake this weekend. Me and Dan possibly not the best people to ask that question to, so we might have to save that for a Stuart stream, but we'll see how we go. Field Gamila, apologies. Do you think Max should have waited one more lap for his move? Going off the track seemed to ruin his tyres. He drove a great race regardless. Very good question. Short answer, yeah. Maybe not. The trouble is, Dan, in that situation, he's got to go for it, because you don't know if you're going to get the chance the next lap, do you? So if you get the opportunity to go wheel to wheel, side by side with Hamilton, you've kind of got to go for the move. But it wasn't like a do or die last lap thing, was it? So I think he had to go for the move, but I understand the point being made there that he could have left it a lap and maybe tried again on the start-finish straight rather than risking contact or going off track at that corner. It's a fair point.
Yeah, I think he made the right decision going for the move. And I think he made the right decision going for the move up to turn 3, because throughout the race today and throughout F2 as well, if you make that move down the main straight into turn 1, the other driver behind gets DRS up towards turn 3 and more often than not would get the place back. So I think by Max taking it up at turn 3, he's then got the whole lap to go round. Yes, there's that little DRS zone in the middle, but it's not as powerful as the other two. He's got the whole lap to bomb it as quick as he can, get away from Lewis, and then by the time they get back round, Lewis doesn't have DRS. So I think he made the move at the right place. And I think in terms of timing as well, he was at a stage in the race where he didn't know when his tyres were going to fall off the cliff. And something we definitely saw in F2 this weekend, especially in the first race, was that if you stayed behind the car in front for too long, you're just going to get stuck there. And so I think that little gamble of waiting behind potentially could have cost Max today. So I'm not going to blame him for making the move. I understand the sentiment that perhaps he could have waited a little bit longer and made a more clean move and more definitive move. But I think with the risk of staying behind for the rest of the race, he did have to go for it.
Thank you very much to Charles Edward Cheese for two $250 donations or contributions. My maths is terrible, but even I can tell you that's $500. Hey, you see, I'm getting good at this. Thank you so much, mate. That is massively appreciated. Once again, I'm not even going to tot up how much you've contributed towards this channel over the last few months, but you've been incredible. Always appreciate it. I mean, I appreciate every contribution, whether it's $1 or $1,000. It doesn't matter, but thank you so much, Charles. Massively appreciate it. It says, wow, just wow. It's sad that it's still 2v1. That said, I am loving the results of these slight reg changes. Great racing up and down the grid. I am excited for the rest of the season. If it's going to be this close all year, oh boy. Also, there is definitely a curse on that second Red Bull car. That's an opinion shared over on Twitter. And second contribution was, additionally, shake my head at Seb Vettel. The guy's a bit of a... Is that a liar or a leer? Lastly, this is why you pay Lewis, and Fook the AWS inside graphics. Yes, especially the qualifier ones. I switched channel yesterday during FP3 when they were like, and here's how qualifying is going to look. I don't care. I'll watch qualifying. You were wrong, by the way, AWS, but that's why I watch qualifying. I don't need to be told what might happen in qualifying. I'll watch it and find out the best way. And then I went back and missed something important probably, but there you go. Thank you very much, mate. Massively appreciate it as always. And Roosevelt Davis says, can you say how much Perez is a better threat to Hamilton than Max, just off the management alone? And if he nails qualifying, don't forget him and Jensen. The thing on Checo, I said something on Twitter yesterday, which a lot of people got and totally seem to agree with, is that his first race in that car, his first qualifying session in that car in the same session, so Q2, he was 3.5 tenths off Max Verstappen. Alex Albon back in Bahrain last year in Q2 was 7 tenths off. So that instantly shows you, yes, it's a better car. Yes, he didn't get into Q3 and all of the other caveats that come with that, but he was closer. As a gap to his teammate, he was closer. So Perez already using his experience and his know-how to kind of close that gap to Verstappen. I don't expect him to be right on Verstappen's pace. I think he will be a lot closer than Albon and Gasly were, but you know, I think that's a solid start, even though it was only 11th place. But the key for me was a point that a couple of people made on Twitter, which is a brilliant point. Would Red Bull have had the confidence in Albon to have sent him again on the mediums? But do you know what I mean? They did with Perez. They had that confidence in Perez. That speaks volumes to me. So I think if he can get it right in qualifying, he is going to be right in that mix. So I think he is better for Red Bull and more of a threat to Mercedes as a team, but I wouldn't say Perez is a better threat to Hamilton than Verstappen is. I know that was a very roundabout way to answer your question, mate. Welcome to the F1 word. I like to go on around the houses before I get to my point, but yeah, I don't think he would be on the level of Max to be able to take on Lewis Hamilton, but I fully expect at some point this season, Dan, to see Sergio Perez versus Lewis Hamilton somewhere this season.
Yeah, I would go as far to say I've seen it quite a few times this season. I think last year, if we saw, well, not often enough, but we saw Hamilton versus Bottas, throw in a Max Verstappen, I think Hamilton's going to be focused on that. And I think with Perez in behind, like we said earlier, and we will say all season long, so sorry in advance, people, but strategy is going to be so key this year. They've got to be battling, because there will be a stage where Hamilton and Verstappen are on one strategy, Perez and Bottas are on another. Chop and change any of those drivers, and there's going to be battles between all four of them all year long. Very much the same feelings as you, though. I think Hamilton and Max are going to be the two at the front. Perez is going to take a little bit of time for him to get used to that car, but already this weekend, not a million miles away. And I would guess, he said, I think 5 races until he gets up to speed. I think that's about fair for the position he's in. But as soon as you start getting to circuits that perhaps he likes a little bit more, Max doesn't like as much, he's going to be right in the mix.
We're going to have to stop there on the top two teams, mate. We've been talking 33 minutes.
Yeah.
I know it's been a while since we've had a race reaction, but wow, that's quite impressive. Even for us, usually it's about 15, 20. So yes, I'll do some more super chats in a bit, and we'll do them throughout the stream as well. But we've got to talk about Lando Norris. I mean, that lad impressed me last year in Austria, season opening race. This weekend, all weekend, he's looked pretty pacey, he looked very comfortable in that car, so the McLaren clearly handling very nicely for him at least, or from the outside looking in, he might tell us something different. But 4th place today, he never really looked threatened, did he? He kind of some really good overtaking at the start. A little bit of squeaky bum time for Andreas Seidel when they were side by side and battling early doors. Norris and Ricciardo, some really aggressive overtaking, good wheel-to-wheel action. Strategy paid off well. He just looked very comfortable in fourth place because I thought once Perez had cleared, I think it was Sainz, that he would soon pass Leclerc, but that seems to take a little bit longer. And then he breezed up to the back of Norris, and Norris would probably, be in a fight and probably lose that fourth place to Checo. So I think Norris did a fantastic job today. And he's one of those drivers that had a good first season and then grew in his second season and looks like he's growing even more. So really impressed with him. And I think yeah, I think had Perez been up there, he would have ended up fifth. But you can't take anything away from him because it was just a stellar drive. There's not a huge amount to say about him because he never looked threatened. It was all in those opening laps, wasn't it, where he kind of got the moves he needed to done, and some really good stuff with Bottas as well, nearly right in the mix for a podium early on.
Yeah, and I think I don't know if you feel the same, but after yesterday, I was a little bit disappointed with McLaren. I thought they'd be. I mean, in Shane Bear's predictions, I went all in with McLaren this season. I was very much thinking they were going to be third. And after yesterday, I was a bit worried. I was a bit nervous. But race pace today looks really, really good. And Lando, who I'm sure was probably a little bit agitated that Danny Rick just beat him in qualifying yesterday, straight away, lap one, elbows out. And that's what we love to see with his teammate. Then Charles Leclerc, you mentioned with Bottas as well. Gasly, who was in the mix at the very start as well on that restart. Seeing all of those drivers battling into turn one at the beginning was great to see. And I think Lando this year understands that this is an opportunity for him to become that number one driver, to prove that he is as good as a former race winner in Daniel Ricciardo, and to prove that he is a potential future race winner and maybe even world champion. And I think today was very much laying down the glove, if you will, that, yeah, he's going to be fighting all year long. And if there's any kind of incidents up ahead, I think he was 20 seconds behind Valtteri at the end. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was something similar there. So there's still a little bit of way to go between those midfield teams. Oh, 9. Even better. That's less than half of 20. So I'll shut my mouth quickly there.
Maths is doing well tonight, mate. We're nailing this one. Don't forget, though, Bottas did have that extra stop towards the end. So
that's probably what I'm thinking of. But even still, any kind of incidents up ahead, he's putting himself in the right place at the right time. And even though Perez had his own incidents today, beating that Red Bull for the first race of the season is still a good omen. But the fact that he was so comfortable in front of that midfield today, I didn't really hear any moaning. There was a slight one battle in Leclerc, but I don't think that was anything. Just plain sailing. And for a team that a few years ago, everything in the world seemed to be crumbling down on them. Engine issues, penalties, couldn't get pit stops right. Everything today from McLaren seemed to go really, really well. So a great start for Norris today.
Yeah, and I think the thing he's talking, the turn 4 thing where he said he was pushed off, I don't think that's a thing there at all. That's not. It's one of those corners that we get at some tracks where if you're on the outside, in fact, actually, I think most corners are probably that in Formula One, but certainly when it comes to tracks, sort of modern tracks that are concrete runoffs predominantly, when you're on the outside, you're going to find yourself getting squeezed out because the driver on the inside, they've kind of got that. I hate the phrase because you don't have a right to anything, but you know what I mean? It's their corner. They've got the line. If you're not clearly ahead, then there's no reason why the driver in front can't not push you off, but just make sure you know, I'm taking my line. You need to get out of the way. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, in my opinion. But I was really impressed with Norris today. And it's a big moment for him as well, because you said there about sort of staking a claim as a number one driver. Daniel Ricciardo, massively quick. I'd say massively experienced, been around since 2011 now, so plenty of experience. It is only his first race in that McLaren, so obviously as he gets used to that car and that team, you know, it might take him a little bit of time to get up to speed, bearing in mind that the likes of Ricciardo, Sainz, Perez, for example, they've had a day and a half in that car before this weekend in testing, so it might take them a little bit of time to get up to speed. But that's a very good start for Norris, and a bit like kind of the fastest lap thing with Bottas, we could look back at this race and it could well be that the fourth place today is what ultimately sees Norris beat Ricciardo. We've got a long way to go, 22 races, so many twists and turns, but it's early doors. These results, you hear it from teams all the time when they say, oh, it's a long season, it doesn't really matter today, it's about the bigger picture. But so many times when you're looking at midfield fight, when you go back to those early races, for example, if he's here, don't say it in the chat, I'm keeping an eye out for you. For example, last year, Racing Point's 15-point deduction cost them third place in the championship. So, you go early doors in the season, results like that could be critical for Norris. So, and it's a confidence builder, isn't it? It's going to give him that confidence to go into the rest of the season saying, yeah, I can take the fight to this guy. But it's going to be great when Ricciardo is... I mean, we're saying it's Ricciardo when Ricciardo's fully up to speed. He was 7th today. That is not a bad result at all, is it? He wasn't a million miles away from his teammate, really. So, you throw Perez into what you'd assume would be... Let's assume he does get to grips with that Red Bull and it's 4th place for him. Well, Norris is 5th and Ricciardo 7th, so there's not much in it, is there? But yeah, really good from Norris today. But I tend to agree with you, Dan. They disappointed me yesterday. I legitimately thought that they would be 3rd on pace, like clearly 3rd, not like by a 10th. I thought they would be clearly 3rd and possibly challenging Mercedes and Red Bull in qualifying yesterday in the race today, and they weren't really. They weren't on that pace at all. So that'll teach us for not taking our own advice. I sit here in these testing streams all the time and I just go, do not read anything into testing. And then I proceed to read way too much into testing. It's just kind of impossible not to do it. But yeah, I think ultimately points are handed out on a Sunday. So if the pace isn't there on a Saturday, it doesn't matter as much right now. But as the season goes on, they're going to want to sort that one out. But yeah, I tend to agree. Expected more yesterday, but if you'd have offered them 4th and 7th this morning, they'd have been very happy with that, no doubt, I'm sure. So, Charles Leclerc as well, mate. I mean, that Ferrari is definitely, based on what we've seen this weekend, better than last year's car. There certainly appears to be more power in it down the straights. Leclerc was actually able to fight, but do you think we're going to have another season where Leclerc really extracts the maximum from that car? Because his lap yesterday in qualifying was... we talked, I think Gasly got a lot of praise and we talked a lot about Verstappen taking pole, but I think Leclerc's lap was one of the laps of the day yesterday, if not the lap of the day. Fantastic.
So good. I mean, considering he finished in the top 10 last year was a miracle. Thinking what he could do this year in that car, which seems so much better than the 2020 Ferrari, is borderline scary with the ability of Charles Leclerc. And I think yesterday... why I was disappointed with McLaren is that I was so surprised with Ferrari and Alfa Tauri. It was kind of a mixed bag. And Leclerc's lap, whilst it was so good, Carlos Sainz wasn't a million miles away either. And I think whilst Leclerc was able to extract, I would say, the maximum today, he'll probably be frustrated. Checo got in with a couple of laps to go, but that Ferrari is in a completely different league to that Red Bull. I think Sainz, I heard him quickly mention on Sky after the race, he was a little bit cautious today. And whilst that confidence grew in the race, he started getting some of those positions back. He lost on lap 1. And I think maybe, again, mentioned it with Perez earlier on, 4 or 5 races into the season, we'll see Sainz starting to get in the mix with Charles a bit more, in the mix with the McLarens a bit more. But I'm very much a believer that Charles is a future world champion. And I do think he will be the man leading that team this season. And it looks like, I don't know about you, but it really does look like they're in a fight for 3rd this year, which I was not expecting a few weeks ago.
You can always tell when a guest on this channel doesn't have to deal with the comment section, can't you? I firmly believe Leclerc's a future world champion. Oh, great. I agree. I think he's got the potential to be, but there's a lot of people out there that think he's utter trash. I don't quite know what they're watching, but each to their own. It's all about opinions, isn't it, mate? At the end of the day, no point having an opinions channel if you're not going to listen to everyone's point of view. Warren M, actually, on that subject in chat, making a good point on McLaren, says, don't forget, McLaren's first race with the Mercedes engine, still lots to learn, and they'll improve a lot that first upgrade weekend. Excellent point. For a brand new power unit, people thought they were going to struggle to integrate that into the car. They've got to be pleased with the result today. And Charles Leclerc, I can't say any more on him. I just think he's just... It's going to be another one of those years where he not outdrives that car, but really pulls the maximum from it. And keeps... I still think Ferrari are in the hunt for 3rd place. I genuinely do. And this weekend has actually convinced me even more, because Carlos Sainz, really good pace towards the end. Only second off Daniel Ricciardo. His final lap was a 1:35.7 versus a 1:35.8 for Ricciardo, 36.9 for Leclerc, and he was on the pace of Norris in fourth. So some really good stuff from Carlos Sainz. And I think 8th place on his Ferrari debut in a team that, again, he's not been in very long in terms of track time, 1.5 days in testing. He's got a tough teammate to go up against. He looked racy today. He looked comfortable in the car. Another driver that maybe didn't impress me to the levels of Norris and Leclerc. Kind of like Ricciardo, didn't impress me to that level of Norris and Leclerc, but I think for a debut in that car, it's a solid performance across the whole weekend from Carlos Sainz, and it's great mileage and great track time. So he's got, come Imola, he can take everything he's learned this weekend to a completely different track, it must be said, but take everything he's learned this weekend of that car and maybe take another step forward. So I think solid start. I would say for everybody in that top 9, certainly. We'll talk about Tsunoda in a minute, who I love, by the way. He's bloody brilliant, that boy. But I think everybody in that top 9 could be very, very happy, except possibly Bottas, who seems a little bit flat. But solid start to the season for Sainz. And yeah, we'll talk Yuki as well. Why not? We may as well. The reason I love him, by the way, is I was just listening to him before we went live on Sky, chatting away to and all I could hear was Simon Lazenby giggling, because he's just got such a great sense of humour, and he doesn't care. He does not care who he's racing. He was saying about how, he's watched Alonso growing up, and he was one of his heroes, or one of the drivers he watched, and his dad was an Alonso fan. I mean, Alonso, 20 years experience, Yuki Tsunoda, 20 minutes experience in Formula One, and he's throwing it down the inside from 2 car lengths back on a double world champion. I mean, what a lad. That's how you debut.
It was such a good debut from Yuki Tsunoda. I was a little bit disappointed in today's race in that, because the fight at the front was so good, we didn't always get to see that fight in the midfield as much as we normally would. But that little box in the bottom corner, I mentioned earlier, was going all day long. And so many of the moves from Tsunoda were popping up there, and then we'd have the replay afterwards. And he was constantly on the move. And I think, like a couple of other drivers, the start wasn't fantastic. But considering turn 1 and the nature of the first sector on this track, I can understand he was probably a little bit nervous and wanted to take things careful, like some other rookies didn't on that one.
Carry on.
So I think, losing a couple of positions on the start, he didn't let that phase him. Kept cracking on, had a great ding-dong with Seb Vettel, had a fight with Ocon as well. Like you mentioned, that move with Alonso must have meant so much to him, but I don't think he really cared that much. He was just passing everyone left, right, and centre. And to get in the points was one thing. And I actually thought he finished P10. And then when we look at the very end, he's P9, even better. So I missed him make a move on Lance Stroll as well. But when you consider last year, and again, I don't want to bash Alex Albon, but I also don't want to bash Danny Kvyat now. If Kvyat started in 12th, I don't know if I'd have had full confidence he would have finished in the points, if that made sense. So the fact he's done that on debut, getting that benchmark out of the way is fantastic. And the fact that he was kicking himself for not getting into Q3.
Yeah.
In an Alfa Tauri. That is...
He was second in Q1.
Yeah. Such high hopes for this boy. An incredible opening weekend. I think Gasly will have the measure of him over the season. And actually, I think Pierre got so unlucky with that little bit of contact losing his front wing. Minor contact with Danny Rick. But that car looks quick. And they've got a driver lineup that I think are going to be really hungry this year. And if Yuki can perform like that in every race, there's going to be some fireworks and it's going to be a joy to watch.
And it's good that he was disappointed that he didn't make Q3. Because I get...
Yes.
I know drivers have to be realistic, and it's kind of, Alonso's come out and clarified his comments, but he said in midweek, he mixed a question up, but his response to a question about, do you think you're as good as Hamilton Verstappen, was, I'm better than. He then clarified that and said that what he meant, that he was better than he was in 2018. But people kicked off about that, and if you don't think you're an exceptionally good driver and you're not disappointed at what you consider underperforming, why are you on the grid? Do you know what I mean? Every driver out there needs to have the confidence to say, yeah, I'm as good as whoever on my day or whatever. So Yuki Tsunoda to be disappointed after qualifying, I think was a really good thing to hear from a rookie. And I think he could have. I think I mean, I was surprised to see AlphaTauri go with the medium tyres in quali. I thought they'd go with softs for some glory laps and make the headlines, if you like, and then maybe play with strategy in the race a little bit. But they had the confidence with Gasly and it paid off, didn't they? So there you go. But Tsunoda's impressed me ever since he hopped in that car in testing, really. Just his attitude, his pace is there. He's still young. We can't get too excited. Long way to go, definitely, this season and hopefully in his career. But I mean, that is how you announce yourself in Formula One: throwing up the inside of a double world champion, getting super punchy, making some great moves, and being disappointed despite actually having an all right qualifying. A qualifying that you've touched on there, 12th place. Probably where Kvyat would have ended up. So, and Kvyat's got a lot more experience than Yuki Tsunoda. I think we could say that definitely. But just a word on Carlos Sainz, Dan, because I kind of skipped over him a little bit. How did you feel sort of briefly about him this weekend? Do you think it was? I just think he had a solid start in that Ferrari.
Yeah, there's not really a lot more I would have asked for. I think going into this weekend, if you'd have told him Q3, scoring points, thereabouts with McLaren, he would have been happy. And that's exactly what he did today. And apart from a disappointing start, he made up for that. Had a great couple of moves in there. That consistency of the smooth operator was certainly in effect today. So, yeah, overall, just a really strong debut for that team. And the pressure that comes with driving for Ferrari as well. We've seen so many drivers struggle over the first half of the season, and that definitely wasn't there today for him. So, yeah, overall, a really good start.
Also worth mentioning on Tsunoda, of course, that I've already got 2 points on the board in Chambers prediction challenge. Anyway, 10th place for Lance Stroll today. Talk about disappointment. Aston Martin. I mean, I predicted 5th in the constructors at the start of the season. I was pretty confident they'd be at least 5th. If things don't pick up, mate, I know it's only the first weekend, but wow, they might struggle to get 6th this season. I mean, Otmar Safnauer is clearly not happy with the regulation change. They run a much more flatter rake than the likes of Red Bull do, and the general feeling in the paddock, and those who know far more than me about this sort of thing, is that the new regulations favour high rake like Red Bull, and have taken, I think Otmar Safnauer said, about a second away from the lower rake cars. So he's not happy with the regulations, but a point for Stroll today? I mean, I said earlier about other drivers, maybe we'll look back at the end of the season and this point could be quite important, but I don't want to sit here and say that's damage limitation, because I just find that so disappointing. I expected so much more. I mean, Stroll was okay today, don't get me wrong. He was involved in some battling. I don't know what to say. I'm just utterly disappointed in what we've seen, and it's all right, yes, first race, Aston Martin are back in the sport, but this isn't a brand new team. This is an established team going right back to Jordan. Last year, they were fighting they won one race and they were fighting for podiums some weekends and top end points. So really disappointed with Aston Martin this weekend. Less so Stroll, but certainly Sebastian Vettel. I mean, disappointing in qualifying. Probably doesn't cut it. Really low down on the grid. Gets a penalty for ignoring yellow flags. I think it was double waved yellows. I think the rule, what he's been caught out by, is something to do with having to abort your lap if you come across double waved yellows, and he didn't, even though he wasn't quicker, which is really weird. But just a horrible weekend for Aston Martin as a whole. And I think, Alpine didn't have a great weekend, but I think it felt like there was more potential because Alonso was driving well. Ocon, prior to the incident with Vettel, was doing okay. I hope you see what I'm getting. I felt like there was more potential in Alpine's performance this weekend, and I saw very little, if anything, from Aston Martin. Possibly one of the shocks of the weekend, on the negative side of things.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. This might sound a bit harsh, but I think Lance Stroll was the only shining light for the team this weekend, in the sense that he was battling in the top 10. He has come away with points, but a pretty dreadful debut for Seb. I'm not 100% sure what happened with quali, and that still seems to be a little bit vague, whether he already backed out of his lap and maybe he thought that yellow flag for Mazepin was still carrying on through sector 1 and then got caught out by Sainz slowing down. If there was a yellow flag there as well, I'm not 100% sure on that. So I'll cut him a little bit of slack for starting 18th, but I I just felt he would be able to get through a little bit quicker. You know, he was battling with the Alfa Romeos, which, to be fair to them, were much better than I expected today. They were a massive surprise. They've done brilliant work over the winter, but I still thought Seb would be able to get past them, considering where that racing point was at the end of last year and the expectations for the team. They wanted to be fighting for podiums and maybe even race wins, people were talking about over the winter. That's not going to be on the cards, judging this weekend. And yes, okay, it wasn't a clean weekend for Seb, and even Lance as well had a couple of issues and strategy didn't necessarily go his way. I'm just not convinced they've got enough to fight McLaren, Ferrari, Alfa Tauri, and I'm in agreement with you. I think Alpine, even today, weren't able to show their full hand because Fernando was driving a fantastic race up until his brakes failed. So many question marks for this team, and just not really any sort of light at the end of the tunnel for them from what I can see at the moment.
It's a line I've used already in this stream. It's a line I'll probably use between now and the end of it, and it's a line I'll probably use between now and Imola. It is still very early days in the season, of course, and there's still plenty of time for them to turn this around. But with limited development likely to take place this year, because obviously main focus is going to be on 2022, if they're going to find whatever the issue is, they need to be flipping quick about it, because otherwise again, very early days, but I wonder at what point Aston say, yeah, this isn't working, full focus next year, because they're a team that have the ambition to win titles. So, and not that any other team doesn't, but you know what I mean? That is, Lawrence Stroll is very clear. I'm not here to finish fifth. We're here to be challenging for titles and winning titles. So how soon before they switch up development? A little bit early to be talking about that, of course, but Sebastian Vettel qualified 18th, started 20th after his penalty. I think the rule is, as I understand it, if it's double waved yellows, you have to abort your lap, not just back off. And I think that's what has caught Vettel out, even though he did back off because he didn't improve, did he? So such a weird, I don't know. I think it was in drivers caught out by it before, to be fair. I think Bottas was told on his lap to abort, so maybe there is something in that one. But Sebastian Vettel, just a bit scruffy at times, but we did see him involved in fighting, and he did look as though he could nick a point or two. And there was a stage in the race with 10 or 15 laps to go where it looked like maybe double points for Aston Martin was possible, but it all just kind of fell apart in an instant with Ocon. That Vettel was quite clear over the radio. He was blaming on Ocon, saying that he was changing his line. I've watched that back. I watched it back when it was on TV. I watched it live, and I've watched it a couple of times since just to double check. I don't know how that's Ocon's fault. He went down the outside of Vettel into the corner, never deviated from his line, went to turn into the corner as you would. Vettel, perhaps losing a little bit of downforce behind him in the dirty air, locked up and straight into the back of him. That is 100% Vettel's fault. If we're going to start saying, well, that's Ocon's fault for overtaking him, then wicked, let's not bother with overtaking. Let's just have qualifying and then not waste an hour and a half on a Sunday watching cars go around in procession. I think Ocon was completely in the right to make the move. He did nothing wrong and went to turn in, and Vettel got it all locked up and straight into the back of him. Again, I'm not going to have a massive go at Vettel. It could just be that he's got back in behind Ocon and lost some downforce, and boom, we've seen it before. But that's not Ocon's fault, surely.
Yeah, 100% in agreement with you. I can't even say what else Ocon could have done, because if he tried to move out the way, then he would have been making two separate moves. So completely innocent bystander. But on Seb in that situation, the one thing he didn't need this weekend was some sort of incident, just a clean race, a clean qualifying, just to kind of get in his head almost. I feel that he's made the right decision. He can forget about Ferrari. Mistakes are behind him. The old Seb is back. And whilst I think the Sebastian Vettel we saw for 45 laps of today's race was reminiscent of the old Seb, I think there were plenty of good moves there. I think the alternate strategy they tried to go really long, and he was having to fend off the likes of Stroll, Alonso. He had a bit of a ding-dong with Leclerc as well, which was quite fun to see. That was all there, but that incident at the end just hangs over the whole race, and it just makes you again just question what kind of Sebastian Vettel we're going to see this season, really. I hope it's a one-off, and I hope the Seb we saw for most of the race today continues this year, because if it does, I think Aston maybe still have a little bit of a chance of getting higher up in the standings. But like you, I think if performances like today continue, we will see them as one of the early teams to start development on 2022.
Yeah, I put the blame at Vettel's door for that incident 100%, but I'm not going to double down on him. Again, if you've been around sort of watching the channel for a while, you'll know that I don't go in hard on any driver in the first third of the season, because I think you've got to give people, certainly new drivers, a chance to get up to speed, and drivers a chance to get up to speed in their new teams. But we have to remember with Seb is he had a pretty rotten testing, didn't he? He didn't get a lot, he was in the car for a day and a half, but he didn't get a day and a half's worth of running. I mean, they didn't get many laps on the board compared to others. He had problems. So it might take him a few races to find his feet in that team, because he's not had a great start, and this weekend won't have helped him. But people get frustrated, and the memes all come out about Seb, and it's like, I agree with you. There were points this weekend or this afternoon where we saw he has still got something there and he can still do it. It's just, unfortunately, it ended with another collision and whatever and a half spin. Technically, I suppose, wasn't it? So, yeah, really disappointed by Aston Martin as a whole, though. But, again, a point, opening race of the season. If they finish 4th or 5th by a point in the constructors at the end of the year, we'll be looking back at this and going, all right, it was terrible, but at least Stroll got that point. So, yeah, Stroll was definitely... I think you're very generous saying shining light, if I'm being honest, but I think Stroll was definitely, out of the two, the one that performed the best this weekend. But again, been at that team now for a couple of years, so we'll give Seb a bit of time on that one. But before we get on to the rest of them, because we've got to talk about as many as we can over the next half an hour. I'll do my usual bit. Thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. We've been 2,700, I think, at one point we're watching. So thank you, everyone, for popping along. Please do drop a like. 463 likes. So if we can get that well up over that, that'd be fantastic. Usually these streams don't do well with likes. So please do get a few drop before the end of the stream. That'd be massively appreciated. Don't forget to subscribe as well. If you are new, lots to come this season. I don't know. I still haven't got it all planned out properly, Dan. I'm very aware we've got a three-week break till Imola, so I can work things out a bit better then. But yeah, before we get on to those Alfa and Mayos, I think it'll be, won't it? Yeah, let's do the super chats that have come in. Harinder Singh, thank you very much for your contribution, mate. It says Ham was gaining on straights and Verstappen was gaining in sector 2, so any track with more corners suits the RB16B, and Imola will be a cracking race. I hope so. I mean, I like San Marino. It's not San Marino, Sean. Stop it. I like Imola as a track, the Made in Italy and Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. I hope we do get a good one there. But it wasn't great last year, was it? There's some nice moments and some good action, but it was a little bit disappointing. So hopefully a bit better. But interesting point on the Red Bull there. Roosevelt, thank you very much for your contribution again. Says, if it's a tyre management battle, who's your money on, Max or Perez versus strong Mercedes team? Because Bottas is better than Max on tyres. Roosevelt's picked Perez. I find it very difficult to pick anybody but Perez when it comes to tyre management, because that's kind of his thing, isn't it, Dan? Perez is the tyre whisperer. Why have I called him that? Why? I'm turning into Crofty, Dan.
Oh, it's not that bad. Don't worry. My money's on Perez as well. I almost said Lewis, but he does like to comment, shall we say, on tyres that aren't so good. But I still think he's good in overall at managing them. But that's always been Checo's speciality, isn't it? Making those tyres go the distance. It's what he was so good at Sauber all those years ago. So, yeah, Checo for me as well.
And butchered you again. I'll butcher it again. Why not? Field Gamilla says, if you could change one prediction you made prior to the pre-season based on this race, what would it be? Also, I was really hoping after the Merc pit stop flub for a McLaren podium. You never know, do you? They were ultimately, for McLaren, they were there to pick up the pieces if something went wrong ahead of them. So that's great from Norris. But honestly, probably Aston Martin, based on today in terms of predictions. But it's tough. I mean, I went for Hamilton for the title, so I'd be tempted to switch that to Verstappen now, just because I think we're going to be that close, and it'd be nice to pick somebody other than Hamilton every year, because that's all I've done for the last 3 years on this channel when I've done predictions. So if not that, then I think I'd probably just drop Aston Martin a little bit lower. But again, anything could absolutely change. Kimi Räikkönen, P11, you kind of touched on it there, Dan. Antonio Giovinazzi in 12th place. I think they were one of the big surprises of the weekend. I completely agree with you. I thought they would be comfortably sort of third slowest, and in that battle with Williams and Williams and Haas. Looks like Haas are going to be pretty much on their own this season. But yeah, I thought they'd be in the fight with Williams and Haas, but they were right in there. Big surprises in qualifying. At times, I was really shocked to see them performing so well. And today, they look quick. They look racy, but that's no great surprise with Kimi Räikkönen in the car. And I would say they're possibly dark horses for some pretty big results this year and might be able to sneak into that top 6 in the championship. It might be a bit of an outside shot because AlphaTauri look good and others look good, but with Aston getting off to a slow start, if Alfa Romeo continue as they are, they could be outsiders for that top 6. And Kimi Räikkönen for me kind of falls into the same bracket as Fernando Alonso in that you never quite know what you're going to get. He could pull a result out of absolutely nowhere that makes a massive difference. So yeah, really impressed with them this weekend because I didn't think we'd see out from them this season, quite frankly.
Yeah. I mean, to answer the question a second ago, what prediction would I change? I thought Alfa Romeo wouldn't score a point this season. I now think I am very, very wrong. Considering maybe over the last, let's say 4 seasons, how Williams have declined and Haas have kind of joined them now. And I think you're right that they're definitely seem to be dead last this season. Haas, an awful performance this weekend all round. But Williams in particular, how they've struggled to kind of refine that form. And Alfa, that was certainly in the battle with Williams last year. The fact that it's been a very quiet winter. They've kept the same driver lineup. There's been no singing and dancing about any kind of new engine, any drastic changes on the chassis. The fact that they've made such a leap forward is incredible. And the fact that it can't be down to the engine because Haas is still so bad. They've obviously adapted to these new regulations perfectly. And whilst I'm not saying they're going to be fighting for points week in, week out, they were only 1 or 2 positions off today. And that only needed 1 retirement, 1 extra, slight contact with, let's just say, Stroll for the sake of arguments. And they're in the points in the first race of the season. Mega job from both drivers, keeping it quiet, keeping it clean. Exactly what Kimi does. And Antonio, no issues today, which is something that he really needed to work on this year, was not having those first lap crashes, losing front wings, spinning throughout races. None of that today. And like you mentioned, I don't want to sit here and just copy what you said for the next 20 minutes, but just a really solid, surprising opening start to the season.
Yeah, and I mean, Kimi was 2.1 seconds off a point. So he was in that mix, wasn't he? And it was... I was sort of watching the slides going off on the screen. I was just thinking back to when I was getting the stream ready, that it felt like every single picture I was finding of the midfield, there was an Alfa somewhere in that picture, even if it was just in the background. They were just... Maybe that's going to be the kind of season they're going to have. They're just going to be sort of there. Like Norris has said with the podium, he was there if something had gone wrong. He could have picked up the pieces. Maybe that's where Alfa are going to be this year. 11th, 12th place, just in the background. Then if 1 retirement, 1 mistake, they're there to capitalise. And like I said, Kimi Räikkönen, I think he had a really good race today. I do. And I think possibly did the best of anybody out there at keeping Sergio Perez behind. It was only for a couple of laps, but Perez was kind of getting in the DRS with his quicker car and breezing past everybody. But Kimi seemed to be able to just keep him at bay for a couple of laps. So yeah, really, really impressed with Alfa this weekend. Even though they didn't score, I think they can be very, very confident going into the rest of this season. I do think they will switch focus to next year very quickly because I think they'd be crazy not to, but it's good to see they've got a relatively competitive car. I can't think of anything I'm missing on Alfa Romeo. If you are an Alfa fan, apologies. A lot to go on. Like I say, it's only a reaction stream. We're not here to review it. Check out Dan's review when that goes up. He'll review it for you and tell you all that, I don't know, Grosjean's still a legend probably. But there you go. Definitely. And I hope we see a little bit from Gio again. He's shown over the last couple of years he's able to grow and he's kind of got better, I think, over the last 2 seasons. So I hope we'll see a little bit more from this year and keep close with Kimi. But I think, 12 seconds off him in the end? Not bad, really, given that he's going up against Kimi Räikkönen, but I'd like to see that gap down a little bit, though. I don't know if Gio had an extra pit stop. He might have had an extra pit stop. Let's have a look, shall we? No, he didn't. So they both had 2 stops. So I'd like to see that a bit closer, but I think a solid start. Esteban Ocon, we've kind of talked about him and Alpine already. I think they looked okay. I think there is reason to be positive there for Alpine this season, but they're another one I'm a little bit disappointed with this weekend because I thought they would be... well, based off the reaction I've had from people in my comment section saying that I'm sleeping on Alpine and they're going to surprise us and they'll be right in the fight for P3, I'm kind of disappointed on that front because people seem to think they're going to be brilliant this year and surprise us all. But I think there are reasons to be positive because Fernando Alonso was, top 7 for a good chunk of the first part of that race, and he was involved in fighting, was going wheel to... He's been away for 2 years, for crying out loud. He's what, fourth? Is he 40? Is he 40, Fernando? Kimi's 41, 42.
I think he turns 40 this season.
Yeah. So he's not a young kid, is he? I mean, he's only a few years older than me, to be fair. So yeah, he's massively young, is Fernando. Still years of potential in him. But to come back after 2 years away and just be nice and racy in that midfield, I did get to see Vettel versus Alonso, which I keep talking about and talked about all winter. But yeah, I think a lot of positives there for Alpine, but I would have liked to have seen more. But Fernando retiring, by the way, because of a rear brake failure, which kind of sums up Fernando's look at times, doesn't he? But what are your thoughts on Alpine, Dan, this weekend and Ocon and Alonso? Because I want to see more. I think they've done okay. And I think Ocon could have been, he's 10 seconds off Gio, so 12. Well, it's quite a way off the points in the end, but he could have been in there for a point if he'd not been compromised by Vettel. Could have been in that fight to maybe nick that one from Stroll, perhaps.
Yeah, there's definitely work to be done. But it was okay, I think is the right word to use, because I think Ocon, we haven't really seen his true pace out in Q1. I think unlucky like Seb, and then wasn't having an awful race back through the field. But then that little tap from Seb at the end of the race definitely didn't help. So I'll hold judgment on Esteban, but Fernando, I was actually really impressed with in today's race, because I don't think that Alpine's as good as the McLaren, as good as the Ferrari, and he was holding his own for a good chunk of that race, maybe a little bit closer towards Stroll than those teams, but certainly was in the mix, and I didn't expect that. It seemed like he'd never left Formula One. I didn't expect that first weekend. I thought he may struggle a little bit. He might get that bit of bad luck out in Q1. Of course, we did eventually see that bad luck, and he didn't finish the race, but certainly there's potential for him this year, and I've got a very good feeling about next year for that team. But work to be done overall. That car isn't as quick as I thought it was going to be going into the first race of the season.
Couple of points to pick out from chat. Daniel says, Alonso, the up-and-coming young driver. Bernardo saying, Giovinazzi had a 10-second pit stop. So obviously had a slow pit stop somewhere that I've not picked up on. Thank you for that one. Fernando will be sunning himself in the chair again soon enough, says Individual 1. And Jamie says they're looking promising, but definitely behind McLaren and Ferrari. I think there's reasons to be positive for Alpine. Also reasons to be positive for Williams. They weren't the slowest this weekend. Finally, Williams have got something to be happy about, and it's that they're not slowest. George Russell got out of Q1 yesterday. Fantastic from him once again. Mr. Saturday. I used the cliche. P14 today was running 10th at 1.8 seconds behind Ocon. I think he can be, I know Ocon was hit, by the way, but I think he can be very happy with this weekend. Williams might be a little bit disappointed with Latifi, but I think on the whole, Williams were... My phone's flashing. Hang on. Oh, look at that. Just as I mentioned Williams, through comes the press release. I'll tell you if they're happy. George Russell said it was nice to be racing, and I had a good little tussle at the beginning, making a few places and losing a few places. I thought it was a well-executed race. The first stint was tricky, but the second and third were as good as can be, and our relative pace was quite strong. Today was the maximum, and I think our relative pace was good. I'm now looking forward to Imola, as you would expect. And Nicholas Latifi says he was pleasantly surprised with how the car was handling in the race. Was expecting something quite tricky to handle, but irrespective of the issue that caused us to retire, I was surprised with the drivability of the car. So why did he retire? Suspected boost leak is why they had to retire Latifi. So there you go. That's why that one. So yeah, both drivers happy. And it was actually obviously a reliability issue that caused Latifi to retire right at the end of the race. So yeah, I think they've got to be pleased, Dan, because they're beating Haas. I mean, we'll put Haas in this mix as well. Mick Schumacher, I think that's about all he can do. I know he had his spin early on, but in that Haas, all he can do is get it to the end of the race. That is what I said this pre-season. When Williams were cut far adrift back in 2019, they finished the first 14 or something races both cars finished, 100% finish record. That's what the slowest car needs to do, because you need to be there just in case, as we saw in Germany 2019, chaos ensues and you can pick up a point. Mick Schumacher did that, which is exactly what he has to do. Nikita Mazepin, the hell was up with him this weekend? I mean, I don't think I've seen a driver spin that much across a weekend in my life. This isn't me going all anti-Mazepin on you. It was just a shockingly bad weekend for him. I mean, did he spin in? Was it spun at 4 of the 5 sessions this weekend, if you include the race, and in the wall at turn 3? If you're in the slowest car, you've got to be finishing the race. It wasn't him trying to avoid an accident. It wasn't him being collected by anybody else. He just lit up the rears on the exit of turn 2, I suppose the entry of turn 3, really, and off he went straight into the barrier. I mean, that's just not... He's got to get that car to the end pretty much every race, or as many as possible, because he needs to be there to help the team pick up on points, capitalise on things going on ahead if chaos does kick off, like Mick Schumacher did today. That's what he needs to be doing. So I think Haas can be thoroughly bloody miserable with the weekend, although I'm sure Mick Schumacher will be content to have finished. But I think Williams have got a lot of reason to be very positive for this season, even though they were still second slowest. But second slowest is better than they've been really for a while at the start of the season.
Yeah, and I think considering they went into this weekend saying that, well, they said it over the winter and winter testing the other week, their car is specifically designed for certain tracks and they're maximizing their potential. We don't know supposedly what tracks these are, but there's 4 or 5 of them where they're aiming for points, and they did not expect that this weekend. So if on a weekend where they're expecting to be a little bit rubbish, they're not last, that's a big improvement for them, and they'll be super happy with that. But on a Haas side of things, like you mentioned, a catastrophe. And whilst that is going to be awesome for us next year with Drive to Survive episode 1, cannot wait for that already. For the team, it's just not ideal. And both drivers spinning, not great. But I think the key thing that you mentioned there is that Mick did get to the end. And that experience of even just silly things like having his first Formula One pit stop, his first Formula One safety car, virtual safety car, all of that adds up. Throw in the likes of Gasly, who had his incident, bit of a battle with Mick Schumacher. It doesn't need to be a lot. At least he's thereabouts. Blue flags, probably something he's never been able to really interact with before. In F2, he was always at the front. Whereas Mazepin on the other side has that all to do again next time out. And so already Schumacher's going to have that little bit of an edge. And in a season where they're not expecting points, if they do manage to nick one somewhere, you've got to be in at the right place at the right time. And for Mazepin, a lot of work's going to be needed to done, because even in qualifying, we saw Russell go through to Q2 yesterday very easily with that spin. If it was another driver, that could have been one of the Haas cars making it through to Q2. So work to be done for them. I do think for both of them as well, maybe a little bit of nerves were kicking in. And I think that's why I was impressed with Tsunoda so much, is that you could tell that boy had nerves of steel today. He was not worrying at all. Whereas I think Mick and Nikita were a little bit hesitant, and maybe that's why those issues slipped in a little bit. But for Mick, I think whilst the spin was disappointing, overall it wasn't dreadful for his first weekend.
Yeah, I mean, Mazepin was complaining, wasn't he, in FP1 about an unbalanced car, and then obviously brake-by-wire issue or failure. I think I'll just say issue for now, because I can't be at 100% on that one, which is what put him into his spin in qualifying. But that incident today was 100% driver error. The quote will be, I'm sure, I'd like to think that Haas will be honest with that and say it was driver error. We'll see. It might have been an issue. We don't know. But from what I saw, that was just a mistake from Mazepin. But I think I just saw a really good point in chat, actually, on Williams from Forever Zone says, Williams would be happy. Williams' philosophy is fast with good weather, and it was windy today. So to be racing like that and not have suitable conditions, they are right there near Alfa Romeo. That is a big shout. I hope so. I'd love to see Williams in a fight with Alfa Romeo for potentially fringe points like we saw today. That would be absolutely brilliant. But good point on the weather, actually, because I mentioned it in the news roundup that went up on for Saturday morning, that George Russell has said that he thought the team could score points at a few races this year, as you've just said there, Dan, but not in Bahrain because the conditions weren't forecast to favour the team. So that's a very good point. And so for that result, solid 1.8 seconds behind Ocon, not a million miles away from the rest actually quite nice to see. Williams not 2 or 3 laps down come the end of the race, actually, which is lovely. Quick word on Gasly. You've kind of sort of mentioned him twice there, Dan, but contact ran into the back of Ricciardo, I think it was, wasn't it? And lost his front wing. A little bit of contact there. Kind of his race was over. Gutted for him, actually, because even though I'd say that's his mistake, that he's gone into the back of Ricciardo, he'll probably admit that as well when the president... Go on, AlphaTauri. Send me it now. I've just got an email. Go on. If that happens, that's it. I'm paranoid. No, it's Red Bull. They've bugged my house. They're making sure I'm not saying mean things about Tsunoda. Yeah, I was kind of gutted for him because he was so good in qualifying, and I think he could have scored some very hefty points today, so that could come back and haunt them end of the year, but we'll see. I like Pierre. I liked him anyway. Then I read his article the other day. I like him even more. And it would have been nice to see him kind of follow that up with a nice big point scoring race. But I think overall, him and AlphaTauri can be very happy because he had the pace in qualifying and probably would have delivered that today without that contact. So first race of the season, we'll see how it goes. Rest of the year for AlphaTauri, definitely. But yeah, I said we might not get through everybody. We did. We may not have got through every talking point. We might have missed something somewhere. We got through everybody, so that's good effort there, Dan, despite the fact we took 30 minutes to talk about the first 3 or 4 cars. To get the rest in 40 minutes is pretty impressive. Driver of the day, I suppose, then. Let me know in chat, one surname. Who is your driver of the day? Official driver of the day was Sergio Perez. I've picked mine, but I'm going to come to you first, Dan. I've picked 2 just in case you say the one that I think you're going to say. Who was your driver of the day for the first race of the season? Daniel. I'm calling you Daniel. Why not?
Yeah, don't do that. Never again, please. To be honest, I'm going to go with the driver I thought in my head before we came on stream, but I can't lie. Yuki Tsunoda has got me very giddy after talking about him this evening. But I was initially going to go with Lando Norris. He really did impress me today. Not only did he make no mistakes, not only did he have a disappointing day yesterday, but he was so far in front of that midfield. He got his elbows out when he needed to with Danny Rick on the opening lap. He had an awesome battle with Charles Leclerc. Faultless. Hopefully I haven't picked the one you were going to.
No, I thought you were going to pick Perez. Because I was going to go with Checo, and I thought, I bet Dan picks Perez, so I'll pick somebody else, and I was going to go with Norris.
Well, there you go.
It all works out in the end. I can't not give it to Sergio Perez. I look at Leclerc. My shortlist was Norris, Perez, Leclerc. Yes, Hamilton, great job to hold off Verstappen. Fantastic to see Verstappen up there fighting hard. But there was just something about that little cluster there of Norris, Perez, Leclerc. Norris drove faultlessly. Leclerc surprised me. Perez came from pit lane to finish 5th place. I can't not go Checo. I have to go Checo. So disappointed after qualifying yesterday. He was gutted that he couldn't. And he admitted it was kind of him not able to hook up the lap rather than anything else. So to come into the race and, not perfect preparation. Don't forget, broke down on the formation lap and still manages to do that. So I can't not say Perez. Let's see what you guys are saying in the chat. I can already see a lot of Tsunoda and Perez. Red Bull Sour Petronas says Fiat. Of course. Yuki for individual 1. My chat crashed. Hang on. Where were we? Apologies. There we go. So we've got Adam Osborne. I think we were somewhere around there. Norris. For Adam, Trash says Mazepin. Jamie says Lewis or Checo. Ash says Norris. Sir Lewis Hamilton from Jan. Crofty got that in as he went over the line, didn't he? Sir Lewis Hamilton, as he is now, wins the Bahrain Grand Prix. Theo says Hamilton. Michael says Perez. Dan Taylor says Hamilton. Jackie says Lando. Unseen Shadow's gone with Hamilton. Let's scroll down a bit further. Mick says Alex Albon. Sandro says Tsunoda for Luke, for Tim, for Escape MCP. David says Norris. I've already read Ash's out. Umbrex says Hamilton. Mazepin for safety car. I think that's Trash again getting that one in, just confirming why he's picked Mazepin there. Jackie says Lando. Norris for Jake as well. Perez for Craig. Perez for Vector 1. Perez for Jay. I think we've got a good mix here of Perez, Norris and Tsunoda. Greg says Tsunoda, Adam says Norris, and Richard says Perez. There you go, 3 together. Max has gone with Checo. Quentin's gone with Hamilton or Perez. Charles, favourite person today, says Stoffel Van Dorn. Casper says Perez. Tsunoda for Howard. We'll go with 3 more. See if we've got anybody a bit different. Prisoner Monkey says Sainz. I think that's a fair nod. I think Carlos Sainz did a good job today. I wouldn't rate, for the lack of a better term, him better than Norris, Perez and Leclerc, but I think it's fair to say he had a very good day indeed. And I think it is pretty much Leclerc for Eli. So that's a good shout as well there. Anybody else pick somebody a bit different? Don't just put somebody different in because I'm asking for it. Yeah, it seems to be a good mix of it. So I think a lot of people are saying Checo as well. So we'll leave it there, Vettel. And thank you to KVJ, who became a new member, says Hamilton for driver of the day. Thank you very much for your becoming of a member. What? English, Sean. Thank you, mate, for becoming a member of the channel. Appreciate that, and I'll say it again. I need someone to really poke me with this one. I will get some emotes and things sorted for membership at some point. I've got 3 weeks to Imola, so no excuses. And if I've not done it in the next week and a half, somebody on Discord, make sure you give me a boot up the backside. Looking at you, Annette, or Jack or Max. Definitely. Please do drop a like. 708 likes. We've got 2,200 watching. So let's see. I'll be ambitious. See if we can get that to 850 by the end of the stream. I'm not sure we will, but we'll see how we go. So that'd be massively appreciated. Don't forget to subscribe as well. But I'm going to ask you one more question, Dan. Put you right on the spot for the first stream. It can be positive. It can be negative. But which driver or which team was the biggest surprise for you this weekend? Of everybody. All 20 of them. Ooh. 10 teams.
I think my gut reaction says Alfa Romeo. I am generally astonished how they have got out of that back three from last year, because they were so far behind. And yes, there's been a regulation change, but it's not a big regulation change. Yes, there's a Ferrari engine upgrade, but it's not a massive engine upgrade. So how on earth they've been able to jump from miles away, scoring 8 points in a season, to a team that looked like they could challenge on a weekly basis, looks incredible. And I do think this will really, your comments will love this, mate. So sorry. I do think if this was Williams making this step up, there'd be a lot more talk about it. And I think credit where credit's due for Alfa Romeo.
No, I think that's fair. If this was a Williams, I completely agree. Everyone would go mad about it. But Alfa are a team, for me, that always seems to fly under the radar on TV coverage, even on my channel. We get to live streams, it's like, what can I say about Alfa? Because for the most part, they're quite an efficient team, aren't they? They're just trying to kind of get out there and get on with it, and you don't see a lot of them. But then you look at the result and you go, well, how the hell was Kimi Räikkönen 7th? Or something like that is probably a line that I've used more than any other on this channel. So I think that's a fair shout. I'd probably say, I think it is Aston Martin for me. On the negative side, I think I didn't think they'd be top 3, but I did fully expect them to be probably around sort of Leclerc, Ricciardo, Sainz. I did not expect them to end up getting beaten by an AlphaTauri. They were nowhere really in qualifying. I just expected more from them. So on a negative side, Aston Martin, it's not my biggest surprise on the positive, but I've got to say, I'm really surprised that Mercedes didn't bog off with this one. I honestly thought, after every single winter of hearing, oh, we're really struggling, oh, we're in so much trouble, oh my God, the car's terrible, Red Bull are the team to beat, and then coming out and smashing it every weekend and making us all look stupid, I legitimately thought it would be a Mercedes front row lockout and they bog off with it with a Hamilton, Bottas, Verstappen situation. I know we've got a variant of that, and yes, Mercedes still won the opening race, but it was by 7.5 tenths of a second. That was not my biggest surprise, but it was a nice surprise that we actually have a title fight. So yeah, I'm hyped, absolutely hyped for this season, Dan. I really am, and I think that I still think over the course of the season, I think Hamilton will just come out on top. That is going to be my shot from right now. but I'm totally cool with whoever wins this one. I think from the perspective of liking to see a different name as champion, I'd quite like Max Verstappen to do it, but I think Lewis Hamilton has done this now. I mean, he's been around since 2007. He's been winning titles since 2008, and certainly pretty consistently, I'd say, since 2014. I think that experience will really help him this year in that fight with Max Verstappen, and I think he will just edge it. But I really just want to see. I'll tell you what I want for this reaction stream, Dan, on the 12th of December, to be us talking about who's just won the title. I want a title decider in Abu Dhabi. Give us something to get excited about for that final race of the season, because Abu Dhabi sucks. That was it. It just sucks. That's all I want is a title decider.
Yeah, fully on board with that. I mean, I think today's race, even if we can just have a few more of these, 5 more of these, perhaps that's a bit greedy, but 5 more races like this
in a row.
In a row. Oh, why not? Let's be greedy for the first stream back of the season. 5 more of these in a row. It's going to be a mega season. And I think me personally as well, ever since I've been, started commentating, doing YouTube or whatever, it's always been a focus on the midfield. So, and I think it's a similar story for you as well. So the fact that now finally we can talk about a title challenge is just awesome.
Yeah, I started this channel June 2017. I think you were end of the year or beginning
18.
of the next year? 18. So
beginning of next year, yeah.
We've very much covered Mercedes domination, so let's just have a great title fight, and let's enjoy. I know this will fall on deaf ears. It's not so bad on YouTube. It's Twitter that's absolutely horrific at times. But can we just, as fans, all just sit back and enjoy this, and then sit on these streams and just chat for an hour and a half about how much we're enjoying this season and share opinions without hurling abuse? I say at the start of every season, then by about 3 races, I'm like, oh my God. People hate each other. This is so terrible. So let's just enjoy it as fans, and I'm kind of hoping this is going to be the perfect way to round off this era of aero in Formula One before we get to 2022. But yeah, a couple of things just very quickly. Max Verstappen, we definitely made good steps forward today, but it's of course a shame not to get the win. He definitely looked disappointed, didn't he? And I can kind of understand why. Very much compromised, I think, on strategy more than anything there. Mercedes did the undercut, but we stuck to our strategy, which was working fine. Okay. Problem is with these cars, it's so hard to pass them. Once you have that track position, it's pretty... what? Oh, pretty powerful. Sorry, it was the way it was edited there on my screen. So, yeah, I think that's a fair point, actually, from Verstappen, because it was coming through turn 13. We had a proper sideways moment, didn't he? Sort of with a couple of laps to go, and I think that cost him in that battle with Hamilton there. I think he would have been a lot closer down the straight, so that would have been an interesting one. And Sergio Perez kicks off his quote by saying, considering my race almost didn't happen today, I think overall we can be pleased with today and take away the positives, as the pace was really good. Potential is there, as we've already kind of talked about there. Just on why it stopped, on the formation lap, all of a sudden the car shut down and I was so close to jumping out, but I stayed in and somehow the car got going again. It was a miracle, really. He's gone with miracle. And Aston Martin, their press release has come in. I'd imagine this is going to make for grim reading. Stroll is pleased that he came away with a point, but he wanted more. No great surprises there. Strong first half of the race, made up some positions, felt comfortable in the car, and we were racing hard against the cars around us. Tailed off a little bit in the second half of the race on the hard tyres, so maybe some issues there, but plenty of positives to take away. Enjoyed the battles, especially with Fernando Alonso early on. I reckon, some of I know Stroll has battled Alonso before, but I think some of the younger drivers out there, that's a line we're going to hear a lot this year. I enjoy battling Fernando Alonso, because I think people are very excited that he's back. Seb Vettel, tricky race, understatement of the year so far. We tried to do something different with strategy by stopping only once, but it did not pay off in the end. I think we made the right decision to try it. By the end of the race, my tyres were falling off the cliff. Just see if he said anything on Ocon. Had a small flat spot. Nothing on Ocon. I was just wondering if he might say something there about whether he's changed his view on that, but they don't tend to in these press releases. So yeah, that's all I've had so far. Waiting for AlphaTauri, so I'd love to know what Yuki Tsunoda's got to say. I'd imagine he's quite excited. What time are we at? So we'll take a couple of, because it's the first one, we tend to overrun on the first one. We tend to overrun and overrun like all of them, really. But anyway, I think we'll overrun all 23 of them. Just a couple of questions from chat, and then we will wrap it up for today. I'm going to get some tea, I think, after this one. How long do you think Checo would take to nail it and back Verstappen? Says Labib. I mean, he said 5 races, but I think, to be honest, Dan, from what we saw certainly this afternoon, I don't think it's going to take 5 races to... I don't think he'll be on the pace of Verstappen, but to get himself in that mix to help Red Bull out with strategy and as they've said there, back him up. So I think 5 races is probably what we'll say, because that's what he's aiming for. But I maybe Portugal? Couple more races, end of Portugal. So maybe going for the Spanish Grand Prix. 4 races into the season, 3 or 4 races. Because he was good today. Very good, coming through the field.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember him having a really good Portugal because he got span out on lap 1, and I feel he came back through the field to get P5. So in a Red Bull car, I'd like to think even better, hopefully. And by then, I mean, you mentioned it there. He was good today. He was really, really good today. So I expect him next weekend to get a little bit closer. And then by the time we get to Portugal, definitely in the mix for the podium. And by the time we get to Monaco, I'd like to say maybe in the mix for pole and the win.
Ooh. Checo win at Mexico. If I could have... I'll be greedy. Four things this season in terms of race victories. Hamilton win at Silverstone with the crowd there. Verstappen win at the Netherlands with the crowd there. Yuki Tsunoda win at Japan with the crowd there. And Sergio Perez winning at Mexico with the crowd there. Oh my days. Could you imagine how brilliant that would be? That would be absolutely fantastic. Formula Racing fan seems to want me to hit 1,000 likes. Always appreciated. 805. I don't think we'll quite get there, mate, but it's good to see the support. I'm not sure yet, Jamie. I will get there on what I'm having for tea. Probably something quick like pasta because it's easy and it's getting on a bit now. Surely Vettel getting close to a race ban. I think he picked up 5 penalty points this weekend, 3 for qualifying with double yellows, 2 for the Ocon collision, says Anthony Bilb. That's a fair point. I'm not sure on what his tally is, but he had quite a few last year, didn't he? So... I'll ask. I don't know if it's not something I tend to look into before the streams, Dan. Maybe I need to start doing that actually with drivers getting a few racked up. But do you know anything about how many penalty points he's got now total?
No, I know he wasn't one of the highest ones heading into the season. I think it was Lewis and George who had the most. So yeah, I'll see if I can have a quick look.
Green Lion says Gasly at France. Extreme BHP says Mazepin at Sochi. I think any driver that wins a home Grand Prix is going to get a great reaction from the crowd. I just think that Silverstone tends to go mad when Lewis Hamilton wins. I think the Netherlands would be absolutely bloody mental if Max Verstappen won on race day there. I think Japan would go crazy for Yuki. I just think they'd be the bigger reaction, if that makes sense, and quite an atmosphere to be a part of. I'm not doing Silverstone this year. I've already decided that one, so... definitely going to be there next year, though. Definitely going to be there next year. Dragging as many other content creators there as I can, including hopefully you and Jonty and co. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, 10 penalty points apparently.
Oh wow.
Finton says, so if that is, I'm not doubting you, Finton, just I haven't checked it myself. So if that is correct, then he's 2 away from a race ban. It's all going to come down to...
very close.
Yeah, it's going to come down to depending on... Because they don't reset in Formula 1, do they? Because Mazepin's reset after F2, but Formula 1's carry over. So it just depends on when they get removed. Because if he gets 5 removed at Imola, for example, then it's not so much of a worry. But that's others are saying he's only got 5. So I will look into that. Leave it with me. But yeah, it's always a concern when drivers pick up penalty points because you just never again know. One more then from Daniel. He had to come up at some point. Do we miss Magnussen and Grosjean, Dan? I mean, what a bloody ridiculous question to ask Dan, the Grosjean fan, if he misses Grosjean. I miss Magnussen. I love Magnussen.
I tell you what, I wouldn't have said this before this weekend, but I'm glad they have gone because that Haas is dreadful. If they were in another seat, fair enough. But I think that would have pained me watching them be so far behind today.
That's a fair point, actually. Yeah, in that terrible car, I think if I was if I was Magnussen and Grosjean, I'd much rather be racing where I'm racing now than driving around that Haas, because that Haas looked, I mean, people will laugh at the Mazepin spin and criticise him for that. That's always going to be a thing that happens. But Schumacher lost it all by himself, didn't he, as well? So obviously that car is a bloody nightmare to drive. So yeah, very good point actually there, Dan. I like K-Mag. I always liked K-Mag. He frustrated the life out of me at times, but I absolutely loved him. I thought it was brilliant. Great character. We don't have enough of them in F1. But yeah, I think we'll wrap it up there, because I think a few people are saying 5, some saying 3, some saying 10. So we don't know on the said Vettel thing. So we'll keep an eye on it, see how we go. But yeah, thank you very much, Dan. It's been a pleasure, mate, as always, to sit here and waffle F1 with you, but to actually talk about a race. Last time it was testing, and we were probably way off of what we were expecting. But you know, I'm just really pleased to have Formula One back. Can you tell?
Well, thanks for having me, mate, because not only is Formula One back, but what a barnstorming way to start the season. That was so good. And we've said it all this evening. If the majority of races this season are even just half as good as that, it's going to be a mega year. So thanks for having me, dude.
No worries, mate. 3 weeks till Imola, though. What are you doing to us? You can't leave us with that cliffhanger.
Yeah, that's not fair.
Christ, I'll see if I can get the teams together and arrange a Grand Prix around Lincoln or something like that, just while they're waiting for Imola. God, absolutely ridiculous. But yes, mate, thank you very much, and I'm sure I'll talk to you soon.
See you later. See you later, chat.
Thank you, Sedan. Thanks to you guys as well for coming along for the first one of the season. I'm so excited. 22 of these streams still to come. Of course, more importantly, 22 races to go. So I hope you enjoyed that first race. It was absolutely incredible. Thank you to everybody who's dropped a like on the stream. We did get over 150 in the end. 857. So thank you very much, everybody. Please do drop a like before you go. Always appreciated. Don't forget to subscribe as well. Lots to come this season, including everything you've seen this weekend, previews, news roundups, streams, and now we've actually got some racing to talk about, some more feature videos as well. So lots to come, and hopefully a bit more consistent this year after what was absolute ruddy chaos at times last year, not just in Formula One, but on this channel and in everybody's lives. So hopefully a bit more normal, whatever that is. Whatever that is. Max wants me to do marbles over the 3-week break. I'll think about it. Probably not, but I'll think about it. I've got loads to get ready for Imola and content to make for this channel. But yes, massively appreciated as always for your company this evening. Imola next, 3 weeks away. Thank you as well to everyone for your contributions today. Just double check I've not missed any. If I have, I'll read them out super quickly now. No, I have missed them. Greg, thank you very much for yours. Says, is Mazepin devaluing Haas for Dad to buy them out? That's probably a proper conversation for another day, but what I will say is 100% I fully expect that team to be 100% in Mazepin's control by the end of the year. I think Gene Haas may well have had enough, but that's only an opinion, only sort of something I'm observing. But to kind of answer that one a little bit for you, Greg, I think that will be under Mazepin ownership, or at least majority ownership come the end of the season. But yes, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you again for all your contributions. Thank you to Charles for yours. Always appreciated, mate. You blow me away with them every single time. But yes, I'm going to disappear. I'm just going to go. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean. This has been the F1 Word. And until next time, goodbye.